and callers.
Chat with Katt chaque mardi from 6 o'clock to 6:30 p.m. discussing finance, mortgage, assurance, funeral care sur WSRF 1580 AM and 99.5 FM avec Kathleen Barreau. Nous là pour connecter avec toutes les ressources financières qui peuvent grandir.
Nous même pas haïtiens, les nous fin grandi ti moun nou yo, nous ba yo éducation, yo jwenn bon job, yo vin fonder famille yo. Ki sa ki ka arrive nan vieux jour yo? Ti moun nou yo a payer bill pa yo, petit yo pral l'école, est-ce qu'on déjà préparé enterrement? Pas quitter ti moun nou yo nan problème. Rele Kathleen Barreau dans 786 253 0211 pour le cas edo préparer zafè enterrement. Pas quitter petit ou yo ap chercher l'argent dans mes amis. Rele Kathleen Barreau dans 786 253 0211 786 253 0211.
Nous commençons une nouvelle année et c'est moment pour nous travail nouveau, plan nous. C'est peut-être ça, Caballero Rivera a offert un spécial extraordinaire, moi ça, pour aider à planifier. Avec seulement 2,5% de dépôt, ou qu'à réserver un espace cimetière pour ou ak famille ou. Dans un espace tranquille dans site Floyd là. Léo planifier bonheur dans un moment difficile ça, li ba ou avantage pour pas porter bot blé devant tout le monde. Et spécial ça, pas dire pour tout temps. Relais Kathleen Barreau, jodia na 786 253 0211. Pour plus d'informations, pour cas assurer espace ou. Numéro encore, c'est 786 253 0211. Caballero Rivera, planifié jodia pour la paix, l'esprit demain. Each day, the cost of living is increasing. It is the same as funeral and cemetery costs. Pre-plan your arrangements today and save your family the stress of finding the money later. Finance your plan up to 7 years with low down payments and affordable monthly payments. To set up your appointment, call Kathleen Barreau at 786-253-0211. 786-253-0211. Good afternoon, bonsoir tout le monde, You are listening to WSRF 1580 AM's show, Chat with Katt. We are on every Tuesday at 6 o'clock p.m. and you can actually listen to us if you don't catch us or you maybe are on the go and you want to catch the show later on YouTube or also on Facebook. So we have a very special guest today. This is the actual father of my favorite guest. Let's see how he can compete. So we've had this, Jason Neufeld twice on the show, and he talked about elder law, which is very important, especially in our community because we have a lot of seniors. And he was just telling us a lot about estate planning, with even cryptocurrency, with even trust accounts for disabled children. But now we have the flip side, or the other side, or actually the father of Jason Neufeld, Alan Neufeld, who's going to talk about personal injury law. And this sparked because I asked Jason a question on the show, and Jason was like, hey, listen, this is not my expertise, but let me give you someone who can. And so we welcome to the show today, Alan Neufeld. Welcome to the show, Mr. Alan.
Hi, Katt. Thanks for having me on. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So I'm super excited to have you. There's definitely a need for this topic, especially here in South Florida. We always make the news every single day for something crazy. So why not have someone who has decades of experience of personal injury? So let's just get started into the show and tell us a little bit about you, Alan.
Sure. Lots of times after about 1 minute, people say to me, are you from New York, because of my accent? And the answer is absolutely yes, I am. I grew up in New York, and I went to school there. I did my undergraduate studies up in upstate New York at Syracuse University, and they're known for their broadcasting, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow.
And in any event, I spent 4 years in the frigid cold and made a decision after 4 years of Syracuse that I wanted to come to a warmer climate for law school. And I came down to University of Miami in 1972 and graduated in 1975. This being 2025, if you do the math, this is my 50th year of doing personal injury litigation.
Oh, wow.
And I've had an opportunity to serve the community in various aspects and represent many people in many forms of accidents. We do wrongful death, we do products liability, we do automobile accidents, slip and falls if somebody is seriously injured. That's the type of work my partner and I handle.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. So let's just dive right into it. What exactly does wrongful death mean in a legal sense, and how does it differ from other personal injury cases?
Well, obviously, on its face, wrongful death means exactly that. I mean, you can have a serious injury involving, surgery or scarring or burning or any type of serious injury. But wrongful death is a whole different category because you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, and there are certain statutes in Florida that deal with wrongful death. And there's two different areas of wrongful death. There's wrongful death by medical malpractice, and there's a whole separate statute that covers medical malpractice and death. And then there's the wrongful death statute that doesn't involve medical malpractice. But again, what differentiates wrongful death is the fact that the seriousness involved. You lost one, and there's no coming back from that. But let me just direct your attention to some simpler things, like your audience is going, hopefully, not involved in a death case. I mean, obviously, we're here under those situations. But let's take the common automobile accident.
Okay.
And I just want to give one bit of advice to your audience that is a misnomer in automobile accidents in regards to what is important to your listeners. And if they take one thing from this interview, if there's one thing that you carry with you after listening to what I have to say, it's how do you protect yourself in a personal injury case? So when someone calls me up and says, "Mr. Neufeld, I've been in an accident and I've been seriously injured," but and I ask them about their insurance, they'll say to me, "Oh, don't worry, I have full coverage." And that's when the red light goes off in my brain, and people say, "I have full coverage," and I'm thinking to myself, well, we'll see about that. So when you speak to a personal injury attorney and you're giving an interview, the personal injury attorney is asking himself three basic questions, and you have to have a positive response to all three questions, or you will not have a case. So question number one that I'm asking myself in an interview is who was right and who was wrong on an automobile accident case, okay? And let's assume that you're the innocent victim of harm here. Let's assume you're sitting at a red light and the drunk driver comes along and rear-ends you. You couldn't have possibly have done anything wrong. You are right, the other person's wrong. It's not always that clear. A lot of times there's finger pointing in automobile accidents where there's changing of lanes and you're saying you changed into my lane and the other driver's saying no, you changed into mine. There's finger pointing, and that's a whole different category. But let's just assume for the moment that it's clearly the other person's fault. So check mark number one is who's right and who's wrong, and let's just assume for the moment that you are in the right. So that's step number one. Step number two, any personal injury attorney is going to ask themselves, is my client injured? Okay? So what does that mean? Under Florida law, currently, in order to have your medical bills processed under your own insurance company, it's called PIP, Personal Injury Protection. So when an attorney says PIP, he's referring to the PIP stands for Personal Injury Protection, which is also a fancy word for no fault. It doesn't matter whose fault the accident is. The Florida legislature, when they passed the no-fault law, basically wants a person who's injured in a personal injury case to be able to go see a doctor without the finger pointing, without having to prove who's right and who's wrong. That's why it's called no-fault. It doesn't matter whose fault the accident is. You should be able to go see a doctor right away and get it paid by your own insurance company. That's no-fault insurance. So is my client injured? Let's assume that they were injured and they go see the doctor, and now they're coming to me. They got injured in an accident. They have injury. They've been to an emergency room or they've been to their doctor, and now they're coming to me and they want to bring a case. So just as important as number one, who's right and wrong, just as important as number two, that we can prove that you're injured, just as important is where is the money going to come from? Now, it can come from a couple of sources. Number one, if you're hit by a Coke truck or a Publix truck or a Florida Power and Light truck, you know there's going to be coverage because that's what we call a deep pocket. I mean, that's somebody you know is going to be covered. But let's say it's the average Joe that hits you, okay? So it's just somebody in your neighborhood or, you know, from out of town or whatever, and they hit you. They have to have coverage called bodily injury coverage. And I can tell you, doing this for many, many decades, that there are so many cases that come to me and the person that hits my client does not have bodily injury coverage. It's not mandatory under Florida law. Under Florida law, to get your license, all you need to show is you have PIP coverage and collision coverage, which is a whole different coverage. It's not mandatory in Florida to have bodily injury coverage. Bodily injury coverage is that if you injure somebody, your insurance company is going to pay the damages that you caused, the injury that you caused to another driver. And I can tell you in South Florida, in all over Florida, not just South Florida, that there are many, many drivers that are driving without bodily injury coverage. So if they don't have bodily injury coverage, where are you going to collect from? The person's individual pocket? Not really going to happen. Usually those people don't have, you know, enough money to pay for your injury. So where else is the money going to come from? The answer to that question is what we call uninsured motorist coverage. And if your listeners take one thing from this interview, it's check your policy and find out if you have uninsured motorist coverage. What does that cover? It covers you. It protects you. That's the most important part of your insurance coverage, which means that if you're driving, you get injured by someone else's negligence, and that person does not have bodily injury coverage, which is a lot of the times that's the case, your uninsured motorist coverage will step in and say, take the position that we're going to cover you under your own policy. So if you're seriously injured and the other person can't pay you because they don't have bodily injury coverage, your own uninsured motorist coverage will pay you. And lots of people say to me, I have full coverage, but when push comes to shove and you look at their policy, they've rejected the uninsured motorist. They say, I hereby reject my uninsured motorist coverage, and the insurance company, your own insurance company will say, well, you rejected the uninsured motorist, so therefore we're not covering you for this. And you know what? There's no case.
Wow. So when you sit with a client, you ask those three questions. So how do you know if they have it or not? You look at their policy. Do you scan it to see if they have uninsured and also bodily injury, I think you said?
Sure. So how do I know? Well, as far as my own client is concerned, you can go online and find your policy. Okay. Or you can call your agent and ask your agent, do I have uninsured motorist coverage? So you can find out pretty easily if you have uninsured motorist coverage. Just look at your contract. As far as the other person is concerned, one of the keys is knowing your insurance companies. There are certain insurance companies that advertise and say you can get cheap insurance. And you know what? You get what you pay for. Yeah. Sure, you can pay a little premium and get your insurance. But you know what? Those insurance companies, and I know them by heart, and I see them too many times, I already know when a client says to me, oh, I have full coverage, here's my policy. And all I have to do is look at the name of the company. I won't name specifics now.
I'll ask you after the show.
But I can take one look at the policy and say, no, you don't have uninsured motorist coverage, because they don't even sell it half the time, or they discourage it, because that's where they have to pay. They're making their money on the part of the policy that they're selling to you. Oh my God. And they don't want you to have uninsured motorist coverage because that's where they're going to have to pay up. So my advice, people, look at your policy. If you don't have uninsured motorist coverage, get it. It protects you. It protects your family. And that's what you really want in an insurance policy.
So are there like any misconceptions that you'd like to clear up for those of, because this is like, I already had my list of questions, and you said, you know what, let's take a left and talk about something basic. And we all think that, okay, if I go to if I get into an accident, let me just call my insurance company, everything is taken taken care of, and we put so much trust in our insurance agents to do right by us. But now you really encouraged me to go home and look at my policy to see if I have any of those things. So are there any like misconceptions that you'd like to dispel?
Yes, I'll tell you, insurance companies are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to get you to purchase their insurance policies. But they're not your friend. Allstate is not your good, you're not in good hands or good neighbors or this is, marketing 101. But when push comes to shove and you bring a case and you want to collect against them, then they hire attorneys to delay, to deny. Does that sound familiar?
Very familiar. Where's
Okay.
Luigi when we need him? I'm just
Okay,
teasing.
but this is what I'm talking about. I mean, listen, I'm not advocating anything other than, be a lawful citizen. But
Right,
at the
right,
same
right.
time, I feel people's frustrations because when they need their insurance most, that's when they're left out to dry. And that's why you need personal injury attorneys. We are the ones, I am proud of what I do. I am proud because it really is David versus Goliath. You've
like
got a
that.
multi-billion-dollar industry that is influencing politicians. The recent laws that were passed that are effective January 1st, for example, take the statute of limitations. That's the time that you have to file a lawsuit. I've been in practice for 50 years, and for 49 of those years, the statute of limitations for personal injury cases have been 4 years. As of January 1st, 2025, it is now 2 years.
2 years.
Who benefits from that?
The insurance company
Of course,
does.
because there's less claims that can be filed.
Wow.
And there are other sections in the new tort reform laws that go and favor doctors, favor insurance companies, and can I use the word screw? Screw the little guy.
They screw the little guy. So, Alan, what are other types of personal injury cases that you deal with?
Well, we do with automobile accidents, as I covered. We do slip and fall accidents. It could be, a step that's, there's building codes that are out there to protect people, and you're not thinking as you're walking as to whether or not a step is the right height or not. You're just assuming that it is. But there are building codes that are strictly enforced in South Florida that are there to protect the citizens. And when there's defects in flooring or whatever it is that causes a slip and fall, people have serious injuries. And I want to talk about one thing about injury in general. Sometimes people, whether it be in an automobile accident and you get an impact where your head goes forward and back, we commonly call that a coup-counter-coup injury, where there are microscopic tears that's going on in your brain. You don't even realize it. And so many times I'll have clients come to me and, they'll have their typical complaints of neck and back. And I'm experienced enough, and I'm not a physician, but you do enough. You have to cross-examine doctors, whether it be in medical malpractice cases or in even any personal injury case. You have to learn your stuff in order to be able to effectively cross-examine an expert, whether it be a neurologist, an orthopedic, a radiologist, on and on. You really have to become a mini expert in that area just so you can go head to head with the expert that you're taking a deposition of or you have on the witness stand in a trial. So over the years, an experienced personal injury attorney, and if he has enough clients that come in and experience these head injuries, whether, as I said, whether you're snapped back and forward in an auto accident, whether you hit your head in a fall. And there will be many times where clients will come to me and I'll ask them some questions that, based upon my experience in dealing with these injuries, I'll say, Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Jones or whatever, are you feeling any headaches, or are you feeling forgetfulness, like you put your keys down when you come home and then you can't remember where they are, or you go out to do something and do a chore and then you're driving along and say, what was I going to do again? I can't remember. Or do you have sensitivity to noise when you're listening to television? Or are you sensitive to light when you walk into a bright area? And the clients will start going, yes, Yes. How do you know that? How nobody's asked me these questions, and the answer is, well, these are the type of symptoms that you learn to look for in what we call traumatic brain injuries or closed head injuries. And it's not like your gray matter is spilt out on the sidewalk or inside the automobile, but still these are symptoms that people start experiencing. Or you start talking to their loved ones. It could be a spouse or somebody that's close to your client, and ask them if they've observed anything different about their loved one, such as behavioral changes, more, short-tempered or things of that nature. And these are all things that you look for in an auto accident or a slip and fall, and you get your client to then bring it to the attention of their treating physician, and the next thing you know, you're proving a case that has much more seriousness involved than originally thought. Well, who's looking out for these things?
You are.
At least experience. There's no substitute for it.
So, Alan, what are I'm trying to see how to frame my question for you. So, you've given some pretty severe scenarios for personal injury, especially automobile. Should a person? How do you gauge? That's what I want to ask. How do you gauge whether or not a person should move forward with a personal
Any
injury
type of
case?
case.
Any type of personal injury case. Like, how do you gauge whether it's something that's, instead of it might maybe being like maybe minor, maybe this is not the direction you might want to go. Like, how do you gauge it?
That's a great question. Just like in the medical field, there are great doctors and there are not so great doctors. And in any profession, engineers, doctors, lawyers, whatever, teachers, you got great teachers, so-so teachers, right? So in my field, what I want to do is I want my client to be seen by a doctor whose opinion I respect.
Do you give them a referral, or do they go to their own?
I give them a choice.
Okay.
If you have a doctor that you are comfortable with, then by all means go see that doctor. There are some doctors that are more in tune with the personal injury world as other doctors, and there are certain requirements that you need, reports that you need from doctors in order to establish what we call permanent injury, that some doctors' offices are better equipped to handle than others who don't deal with personal injury. Some doctors won't even accept a personal injury case. They don't want to deal with the paperwork, or they don't want to deal with attorneys, et cetera. So when a client comes into me and they're telling me, hey, I have neck pain or back pain, depending on their complaints, I'm going to have a consultation with them as who's the best doctor for them to see. If they're comfortable with their family physician, they want to go see them, that's fine. If they've had doctors that have treated them before for neck or back pain and they were comfortable with that doctor and they want to go back there, great. I'm not forcing them to go do anything they don't want to do, and I want them to be comfortable. I want them to be going to a doctor that's in a location that they're going to actually go see the doctor, as opposed to, I don't feel so great, but it's going to take me forever to get there, and it's a pain in the neck, and I don't have the time. I'm not going to go. So I really need to have that quality and convenience as a factor. And then once they see the doctor, then there's time to have the consultation with that doctor to see if there's any specialists that need to be seen. So many times, a client may go see a chiropractor, and the chiropractor will do physical therapy, and we'll see if the physical therapy is helping, or maybe it's not helping. And a few weeks go by and they're still in a severe pain, maybe it's time for an orthopedic consultation. Or if they still have headaches after they've hit their head, maybe it's time for a neurological consultation. If they're not sleeping, or they're having flashbacks or psychological issues, there's nothing wrong with getting a psychological evaluation as well, because you got physical injuries and you have mental injuries, and post-traumatic stress disorder is a common symptom, a common problem that people have after a serious personal injury case, and it should be addressed.
So you mentioned something, Alan. You were saying that there's, you might have your good teachers and your not so great teachers, and your amazing doctors and not so amazing doctors. For attorneys, what advice could you give your listeners when they're shopping or looking for a great or in the middle of the road? Because I know sometimes great attorneys cost great bucks. So what advice would you give them when they're shopping for an attorney for personal injury?
Well, first of all, in the one area of law that is an open door for great attorneys and people who can't afford great attorneys to get together is the area of personal injury, because it is the most common area where we work on what's called contingency fee contracts. So my contemporaries, somebody who's been out of law school and working for as many years as I have, they're charging whatever, $500,000 an hour because of the experience that they have. If they're representing corporations or if they're representing, affluent people, they're going to be commanding that type of hourly rate. Well, most people can't afford that. But in the personal injury area, we recognize that when you've been in an accident, the last thing you need is to start paying an attorney. So contingency fee is the norm in personal injury, which basically means that you work on a percentage. And if there's no recovery, then you don't owe your attorney anything.
Oh, nice.
So in Florida, just so your listeners know, before the filing of a lawsuit, that means you come to an attorney and he doesn't file a lawsuit necessarily right away. Some cases, it may be beneficial to file a lawsuit as soon as possible. Others, you may want to wait to see whether or not it merits filing a lawsuit, because filing a lawsuit is a very serious deal. Now, it's very costly to file lawsuits. You have the filing fees. And then you have to start paying doctors for testimony, and you have, your expenses go way up, and you don't want to expose your client unnecessarily to the court system unless you have to. My recommendation is let's see if we can resolve it without filing a lawsuit. But if the offer on the table is not satisfactory and we feel you can do significantly better by filing a lawsuit, then by all means, let's do that. And that's what I'm called. I'm called a trial attorney. I enjoy trials. My firm, we thrive in trials, but we want to do what's right for the client. There's no sense in exposing the client to years of litigation unnecessarily. So in Florida, before the filing of a lawsuit, the fee is 1/3, 2/3 for the client, 1/3 for the attorney. Once a lawsuit is filed, you actually have a piece of paper that you give called a complaint, and you give that to the sheriff, who has what we call the service of process, and he serves the defendant, knock, 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 hello, you're being served. Once that happens and there is an answer to the complaint, the fee goes to 40%. So it's 1/3 before the filing of a lawsuit and 40% once a lawsuit is filed.
Gotcha.
Then there's other provisions regarding appeals and that nature, but most cases don't go that far.
Okay, so I had a listener that actually texted me and wanted you to answer this question, and I have you for 2 minutes. So the question is, who bears responsibility for a slip and fall incident occurring on a sidewalk due to the presence of cracks and other hazardous conditions that may cause an individual to fall and sustain injuries? If you need to read,
that's a great question.
Okay.
On slip and falls and cracks and sidewalks, it all boils down to who is responsible for the upkeep of that sidewalk. If it's a private area, a private, apartment complex or condo or whatever, then they would be responsible. If it's a public sidewalk, then you have to see which municipality is responsible for that particular area, whether it be, if we're talking about Dade County, is it unincorporated Dade County? Is it a city? Et cetera. Now, keep in mind, there are restrictions against government agencies in Florida. It's called government immunity, and there's a restriction on attorney's fees, and there's a restriction on a cap on how much you can collect from a government entity, which is why a lot of attorneys may be hesitant to take those type of cases. You're looking for a private piece of property as opposed to a public one because of the restrictions. So anyway, to answer your caller's question, who's responsible, you have to do a lot of research and see who is responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the area where you fell.
Thank you. So we are actually down to the last, few seconds of the show. I want to thank Alan Neufeld for being on the show. Really quickly, where can listeners call if they want to approach you with their cases?
Well, my phone number is very easy. I try to make it that way. 305-931-6666.
Oh my gosh. I want to thank you, Alan, for being on the show. Thank you, listeners, for listening to Chat with Katt. We look forward to having you next time. And be safe. You were listening to WSRF 1580 AM, 99.5 FM, the first and only Haitian-owned station in the nation. Thank you, guys. That's